Hello, hello, hello. It's so weird greeting viewers when I am in my own home because COVID has turned this year upside down on its head. But I am Lucy Gellman, and this is WNHH Community Radio, and we are on Friday. This is Arts Respond, a collaboration with the Arts Council of Greater New Haven, where I edit the arts paper. I'm very excited to be back after almost a month away from the radio. And today I will be joined by a group of multimedia artists and faith leaders and advocates for public health in the community talking about Night Sweats. Night Sweats is a multimedia performance program that incorporates music composition, storytelling, dance, and video projection for the 32nd, yes, that is correct, the 32nd annual World AIDS Day. So I want to jump right into this because we have a lot of ground to cover. And I want to introduce my guests. We'll also be joined by dancer and multimedia artist Arian Wilkerson later in the program. But I want to welcome Patrick Dunn. Patrick is the director of the New Haven Pride Center. Welcome.
Hello.
And happy Trans Awareness Week.
Thank you. Thank you. I do want to give a shout out to the entire trans community. Recognize today is Trans Day of Remembrance, and hope everyone will consider joining us on the New Haven Green or virtually on social media when we do our Trans Day of Remembrance vigil at 5:30 today.
Absolutely. And I also want to welcome Noah Smith. Noah, the last time I saw you was in person at the New Haven Pride Center, and it was actually only about 10 months ago, but it feels like 10 years ago. Noah is a multimedia artist in New Haven and the greater New Haven area. And I'm also very excited to welcome Reverend Alex Garbera. Alex you're still the head of the Mayor's Task Force on AIDS, correct?
Oh, chair.
Chair, guy in charge. Yeah, and so, and I will say Night Sweats is titled, this multimedia performance is titled after a 1991 poem of the same name that you wrote.
In 1991, correct.
Yes. So that's actually where I would like to start. Not with what Night Sweats 2020 is, but what Night Sweats 1991 looked like.
Oh, well, it was very different from it is today. Sometimes people refer it as the Great Die-Off. A lot of people were dying around that time, up until about 1995, when they came out with the cocktail or protease inhibitors. So a lot of people were dying. A lot of people were still scared. We knew what HIV was then, and we had medications, but they were very crude and very rough on the system. Usually a cocktail required maybe 6 to 18 pills a day, and it was just nasty. And there were a lot of side effects, and they were just learning about the immune system, how it worked. And people were still in question whether HIV was the cause of AIDS. And it was a very strange time.
And I think that a huge misconception, and we'll talk about this in the episode, is that there is no longer stigma around HIV and AIDS, and I would push back against that. But I think that there was a lot of stigma that was different in the 1990s. That's my understanding. Specifically, people were still calling it GRID largely.
GRID, the gay disease, the gay cancer.
Yeah. So tell me about this poem and what sort of inspired you to write this poem in 1991.
Well, actually, I didn't really intend it to be a poem so much as a recording of my experience. It was like, how do I convey this or write this down in a way that I'll remember it? And I'm glad I did. It's sort of a therapeutic journaling. So those Night Sweats were pretty intense. And so this was a way of journaling and helping to process that and those experiences.
Yeah. And so I want to jump ahead to 2020, and then I want to talk about the basically 3 decades in between. When did Night Sweats become an idea? So when did the performance become an idea? Because Patrick, behind the scenes, I know that this is something, and Noah as well, I know this is something that's been in the works for some time.
Yeah, actually about maybe it's almost 2 years ago. I realized we had to bring attention to New Haven. As you said, stigma is still a big issue. HIV is still a big issue. Yes, we have easier treatment. They only work if you have access to them, as well as supportive services such as mental health, housing. If you don't have those pieces, viral suppression is almost impossible.
Yeah.
So I thought having a big event by HIV positive composers done by people with HIV, for people with HIV, would be significant. It hasn't been done in quite a while, and very few, if ever. And then I met Noah and we started talking about it. Night Sweats wasn't even on the radar then. We originally were thinking about a very big and grand event of having multiple HIV composers and having a selection committee. But because of COVID, that got thrown out the window. Night Sweats was just going to be a intro to this big piece, kind of a kickoff, nothing in and of itself, just something to fill up time in the beginning, actually. And so met Noah. He also has shared the same vision of wanting to compose something for people with HIV by HIV.
Noah, I would love for you to jump in and speak a little about the genesis of this work, because I know I met you at the New Haven Pride Center at an exhibition, and I remember hearing about Night Sweats at that time when it was in a different place, and I mean, sadly, we didn't see COVID coming. I don't think anyone saw COVID coming at that time. So talk me through the genesis of this work.
So due to the pandemic COVID-19, we have adapted the format of the work. Originally, it was going to be a live performance. The foundational text of Night Sweats is Alex's poem from 1991. And I've taken this poem and I've set it to music with electronics and sort of like symphonic elements and voice, spoken word, and sort of gone with trying to represent it as deeply as I could. And also, given the state of pandemics, including COVID and HIV, I did not take a route where I tried to have a specific message about living with HIV. I'm not trying to present something to the audience that to make them feel one way or the other, because as we know, it's a very deep subject. So I've created sort of a soundscape for Night Sweats, just about 50 minutes long, which will be realized by dancer Arian Wilkerson and visuals by myself and Ike Smith. So sort of a new format for a performance and combining several art elements, mediums to create something that's very cutting edge and expressive and abstract.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's one of the things about Zoom. It becomes harder to read the room when you're not literally in a room together. But one thing that I so picked up on is you said, this doesn't reflect one experience and it is an abstract performance. And I'm wondering, I always come back to the artist Sulinet, who's a New Haven artist who exhibited at the New Haven Pride Center earlier this year, actually during COVID, who has experienced over and over again, both living at many, many intersections. She's a queer Latinx woman, and also folks trying to put her in a box most of the time. And do you feel that in this performance you are pushing against that box?
Yes. I've attempted to create my own symbols as well as a symbol structure within the music, and within even the narrative of a journey or the narrative of a transformation, or the narrative of any sort of narrative is sort of played with, and it's resulted in a work that's highly organic. And yes, I do. There have been other works revolving around HIV, which I've encountered that have left me and others I know feeling uncomfortable or like the misrepresentation issues, or it utilized sort of as a plot device. And this leads to representation issues and understanding of what living with HIV is like. While this also represents a part of the element is to convey what it was like at that time. So
yeah. So Pat, oh, please go ahead.
I said it just tries to span the entire existence of this, and also take into account the state of pandemic today. Absolutely.
Patrick, can you tell me a little bit more about the Pride Center's participation in this?
Sure. You know, it's kind of fun because there's a whole story, right? Noah and Alex approached me, or actually Alex approached me separately on his own originally, and then came with Noah and introduced us. And Alex, we've been talking about this for like at least a year and a half. You know, there's been a lot of versions of this project and a lot of ideas. I think what I was bringing to the table for at least the initial Leon part is that I was kind of the person that came with technical knowledge, producing knowledge, and also was going to be the center was the fiduciary, and really this was a partnership with the Mayor's Task Force on AIDS, Guardian Health, the center, but then individually with artists and under the kind of larger artistic direction of Noah. And when COVID happened, everything kind of got thrown in the air. And Alex and I had a couple of very strong conversations, I'll say, where, you know, we were trying to figure out how to do something, how to make sure that there was still high impact, and also do justice to the kind of very heavy lift of work that Noah had done, both from a composing side, but also just making all the artistic connections that were to realize the original project. And you know, there was a lot of hard conversations because there was the reality of, you know, I didn't know what the center's financials were going to look like. I was looking at literally tens of thousands of dollars being evaporating from my budget, you know, in lost income from no longer being able to do certain programs or whatever. And so, you know, I think there were moments where both Alex and Noah had to push me to stay in the right lane almost, to make sure that I didn't lose sight in the stress moment of how important this project was. I'm so excited that we all were able to find a way and push through. And, you know, even if it wasn't what we were hoping even a few months ago, because we were going to actually perform it live. And then when COVID cases went up, we had to adjust again. You know, it's been in, you know, I give so many hats off to Noah, because they really forged it forward and kept being, you know, resilient in their art to make sure that every obstacle that came in front of us was getting jumped over. And yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, the center plays a lot of different roles in this project. You know, as we do with anything that we're involved from a commissioning standpoint, we let the artists shape what the work is ultimately as much as possible, and try to not kind of force our voice onto the artist's voice. And I hope Noah walks away feeling that we did that.
Actually, if I may just take up from that.
Please.
One thing that I do have to say is, now more than ever, it's important to listen to people who are on the receiving end of any sort of bias, or people living with HIV, for instance, to actually listen to what they say, to actually listen to what they feel, to what they want to express, and to not dilute that with a profit motive or anything, is if art can influence the way people live and the structures that humanity places up to govern, then hopefully this can reflect out to, the foundational text is a story-poem, visceral, sort of a visceral experience almost, but with a true message. And yet, that's only one of the few poems Alex has written, and Alex's work mostly comprises activism, like years and years of proposing change. So I think this is the reason that the artwork is the way it is, and that it will appear, and you'll have the reactions you have, is because it's not in that vein of profit motive or like conditioning the person to listen to. It's really a full exploration of this, and lots of this is dark. There's some darkness to this, which is people living with HIV being ignored, changes they would like in healthcare not happening, and general like corruptness or unaccountability in the structure. And so I think that something underneath all of this is that the condition of existing with HIV has been that way even for me. So that's not necessarily the motive behind the music, but maybe that helps frame why the music would not be, more conventional.
Well, I feel like we fit a lot of in the same way that that Noah and Alex, you're fitting 32 years into a 50-minute multimedia piece. And more if you're looking at the HIV/AIDS pandemic and epidemic. But I want to sort of tease apart those threads. And Alex, I'd like to return to you and talk a little more about the history and the changes that you've seen in New Haven over the last 32 years. Oh, and I guess it's 29 years since you wrote I do reporter math, so it's not very good. But since you wrote the poem.
Yeah, well, this is the 32nd anniversary for World AIDS Day. HIV started happening around 1980, which is when I had my viral bloom. So it's been 40 years for me. My activism has only been, I would say, for the last maybe 35 years. Yeah, so Connecticut was a leader in the HIV field. We really stepped up by creating clinics and speaking out against downright prejudice, fear, and hatred. Creating like the first needle exchange program in New Haven. We were very cutting edge, and we were like one of the biggest epicenters outside of New York. So,
I think within New England, we were the biggest. That was my understanding. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So the New Haven Mayor's Task Force rose to the occasion 35 years ago, I'm sorry. And I was not a part of the task force originally, but I did join shortly after that formed. And with the advent of protease inhibitors and cocktails, things simmered down. There was this combination treatment, support groups and activism started fading away, and AIDS changed from a movement to an industry. Big change, which is why some of the problems we have today is basically from that. So we're trying to bring some of the movement back into it. Right now, we're sort of a little bit behind our neighboring states like Vermont and Maine and Massachusetts in terms of access and eligibility to HIV care and supportive services. So hopefully we could reawaken the need for it, because HIV is still deadly. Yeah. If you don't have education and housing and the vital services, it will kill you. And the new medications are much less toxic, but they're pretty serious medications. Even though it's one pill, that one pill contains maybe 3 or 4 other medications. So you have to have an expert doctor who knows how to manage the side effects and deal with the complications of HIV. Unfortunately, even still today, a lot of people are being tested and coming into treatment late. That means they're much older, their HIV is progressed to more advanced stages, so it's harder to treat. And once the immune system is damaged, it doesn't really recover to its baseline state. When you lose certain T cells called memory cells, they don't come back. Like the T cells I have now are the same clones of the 90 T cells I had maybe in the early 90s. So it's important to get tested and get people into care early. So it's a change, a bit more apathy, I would say now.
Sorry, you said a little more apathy. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit more apathy. And the stigma has changed from these external sources almost into internal sources like the AIDS bureaucracy, agencies, and the policies and red tape. It's difficult sometimes.
And I would ask also, so within this year, I've heard some people making a connection between HIV/AIDS and COVID-19. And some public health experts have said, whoa, 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 don't do that. And some have said, well, there's value in looking at these two very, very different pandemics and epidemics that do have similarities and overlap. So I guess for you, as someone who has really taken the long view on this and is an expert in public health, what would you say to that?
Well, indeed, I think that COVID, even though it's a very different type of virus, is very similar to HIV in the fact that it uses cells in the lungs to replicate itself, and other cells, as a matter of fact, which makes it very deadly and because it could be transmitted via air, it makes it very contagious. But it revealed the same disparities in care that we've known about in HIV with race and poverty, those intersectionalities. So it's important to look at those intersectionalities and barriers to care that COVID is bringing to light and realize this has been around. And what's really important now is that we are at a critical juncture where we could stop new HIV infections if we got people into care, had them virally suppressed. They wouldn't be infectious, they could live normal lives, and that, along with pre-exposure prophylaxis, we could bring a grinding halt to new HIV infections. We've had this technology for at least 10 years now, maybe more. So it's time to really put the pedal to the metal and say, hey, let's get serious about taking care of people with AIDS and stopping the infections. They need not be.
And when you talk about AIDS as an industry, are you also talking about the fact that healthcare said, I don't want to say healthcare at large, because there are doctors and nurses who are doing heroic work. But there were also insurance companies and folks who said, hey, we have PrEP. This is so exciting. I'm going to mark it up to the nth degree. So all of a sudden people can't afford to use it.
Yeah, so especially in the United States, of course.
Yeah, unfortunately.
What costs $100 a pill here is probably $10 a pill somewhere else. But I would say everybody who works in the field that I know are very dedicated, passionate, caring people, so it's more the systemic issues of systemic bias and racism that's been in Connecticut before HIV.
Yeah. Noah, I also want to come back to you, and I do want to talk about the art in this project as well. But I think it's really important for folks to understand the intersection at which this performance lives, which is public art, also I would say inherent bias and structural racism that has contributed to disparities in healthcare. And so Noah, earlier when you were speaking about what you would like to see, and indeed what you think that Connecticut and the US needs to see in terms of healthcare, for you, what does that look like? Is that Medicare for all?
I also hope that Arian can speak to this, and if they can join, you can ask the same question. For me, I feel like what I need to see is, it has become an industry, and it's almost as if the amount of money that is made off of someone like me who lives with HIV, or someone like Alex who lives with HIV, that's a lot of money a year that basically is generated. So we know that this exists, and we humans we may make these plans to do studies or to change the system or to evaluate, but really it's just that right there that we know that. And so what happens is we don't change it. So we're in the structure reflects sort of being paralyzed into this system, which is very toxic. And so it's a challenge. So the best thing I can do is hope to create some art that is also speaking to what's happened in the past as to what's happening now, which Alex has kind of outlined, but it goes very deep. It's more than just the prices of drugs being inflated, or if that's what you'd like to say, they're inflated. It's more than just all of the money that gets made off of care. It's deeper than that. It's just based on the way people treat you when you're other, and how the system sort of files people out that way. So times, and I'm also on the mayor's task force all the time in these meetings, there's these terms we use, which is like this side, that side. So it's like which side of the HIV line are you on? And so, yeah, I mean, it's interesting with the COVID pandemic to see how this rolls out when people are, say if people are in a culture where they're getting tests, but still working in person essentially together, but with precaution, and then somebody gets sick, and then there's this whole process, which, I mean, it's at least we're somewhat taking that seriously, not necessarily as much as we could, but I mean, there's also, let's just take the idea of a vaccine. So everybody's already counting on the vaccine coming out sometime next year. That's what people are throwing around as information. Yet where's the HIV vaccine?
Yeah. Well, I want to ask all of you about the role of art within this, which may sound like a no-duh question, but at least once a week, and usually more than once a week, I have an argument with someone who says, I just don't understand why you're using art to communicate X. And it might be something about COVID, it might be reproductive rights, it might be public health information more broadly. And so Patrick, since we haven't heard from you for a little while, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. I mean, I think art plays, duh. But no, I think art plays it plays a significant role in from a lot of different perspectives. I'm gonna try and hit the ones that I don't think Noah will hit, because they and I have a lot of similar thoughts on art, I feel like, often, and the power of art. But I mean, first and foremost, I would say that art is ultimately the soul of a community, of any people, and is the heart of any community. And so when you're looking at, well, how do we talk about things? Art is the obvious answer, because words are hard and words are complicated, and they don't always mean the same thing to the same person. Not to say that art isn't subjective and very broad, but the reality is that in that instant when you're trying to understand a piece of art and you think you know what it means, there's this great learning opportunity, this like little crack that happens in someone's shield, where they might open their mind, their soul, their heart to some new concept that they never thought about. It's why art and culture programming is so vital to what we do at the New Haven Pride Center, why it's an integral part of my tenure as executive director, why we invest so much energy in producing artistic experiences for people that are focused on the queer, I'll say queer plus experience, meaning queer people, but also adjacent communities that are part of the community. For example, the HIV positive community, which is not exclusively a queer community. And yeah, I mean, I think that art is really the way, not to use the cliche phrase, but it's how you change hearts and minds. Art is really what it's going to be. We can yell at each other about our disagreements all day long, and neither of us will ever change our opinion. But you can sit down and watch a play or look at a piece of visual art or experience a piece of music, and suddenly you can be relating to concepts that might have been completely foreign to you before. I also think there's something really unique about experiencing hard topics through an artistic lens that is not communicatable otherwise. And I think that particularly with Night Sweats, I have not heard the whole 50 minutes yet, but every piece of it that I have heard and everything that I've seen of Arian's work with the dance and movement, it's there, let me tell you. And I say that as someone who's not HIV positive. I know and understand so much more about Noah's experience and Alex's experience than I probably could have ever had from just sitting and having a conversation.
Yeah. Noah, let's hop to you. You look like you're ready to speak.
Yeah, not just the art, but the manner of art.
Yes.
When you, so yeah, I'm not going to cite previous HIV works. Feel free to explore them. There's probably one that you can think of top of mind, or a character in a show. Anywho, so the manner of art is important. And in this case, what we are is we're sort of, I'm trying to accommodate for the combinations of feelings that we have, which don't quite fall into one category or the other. So like, you not necessarily feel sad or bad given whatever circumstance or whatever expression or gesture in the work in question, but actually it's, like I said, the ineffable, just a combination or some new emotion. So I mean, it's very fitting that we have the words and the human voice in sort of concert with the electronics and the visuals and realized set into an actual experience by the body. Who, I mean, like Arian's designed their own entire choreography. So it's very much allowing for the process of collaboration and abstraction. So it's very expressionist, maybe, if you will. But the art, like I said before, I mean, art and poetry and stories influence, hopefully, the society at large. So what the piece is accomplishing is, in some things, what it doesn't do, in some things, what it does do. And that is relative to the entire situation of the HIV/AIDS pandemic.
Yeah.
I think language has its limitations. It's very dualistic. We learn our language based on polar opposites, this, not that, black or white. And so experience doesn't have that duality. So we have to convey something that's non-dualistic, experiential. Patrick hit that word, experience. And that's where art comes in. So it transcends the limitations of language. So poetry, for instance, can take that duality and make it non-dual, like in the poems of Rumi, a very existential writer of non-dualistic oneness, or art or music, how it can convey feelings where words fail. Because you can't describe sour, you can't describe sad, you can't make a person know what that is unless they experience that for themselves, and that's where art comes in.
Well, and I think, I'm sorry, Lisa, I just want to also add, because Alex said something that may also make me think, I mean, there's something also about experiencing art is also a way to experience otherness from a safe distance, right? Like through art, you can experience things that you either don't want to ever experience, or things that you can't ever experience because of whatever thing. I mean, I think of, you know, for example, we have the exhibit right now that is about Black trans experience. I am never, ever going to know what it feels like to be a Black trans woman. It's impossible because there's too many, but by using the art and experiencing the art, I can be in that moment with the artist, even if it's just for a second, and have a completely new understanding. And I think that's how art really changes it. So whether or not you can physically ever experience something, with art, you can experience it regardless of your own qualities, qualifications, all those other things.
Well, I also, Noah and Alex, I do want to ask both of you, and I also want to talk about legislative stuff before we end this, but I want to ask both of you also about the value of representation. You know, Noah, you said folks are welcome to look at the canon and look into works about HIV/AIDS that already do exist, and I would echo that and encourage them to do so. But I think, unfortunately, for a lot of the American populace who maybe consider themselves like in the liberal, semi-woke category, Rent is their introduction, and that is a show that does not champion representation. It's a show by a white guy who, a straight white guy who ripped off his girlfriend who wrote a very similar.
I'm sorry to speak over you, but I had to leave Rent. I mean, I'm a keyboardist and work with choirs and soloists.
Oh,
so
I don't, this is not a pro-Rent.
Right.
I am anti-Rent. But yes.
So yeah, I mean, I've always done the music, right? Graduations, whatever. Everybody loves these songs.
Everyone sings 525,600 minutes,
yeah.
yes.
But then to actually see it, I saw it in the Schubert Theater. I was so upset. I had to leave, walked home. And this was, and I was actually with Alex. This was a while ago. And so I left and they stayed. And I mean, it was hard for both of us. We were sort of messed up it was a long time. And actually this piece's genesis was, I think that we started really sort of nailing down that Alex had this poem between me and him, and that we were thinking about doing something like this after that so I'm glad that you actually brought up Rent, because it's not okay. And I think there's I believe there's a YouTuber, Lindsay Ellis, I think is her name. I might have that wrong, but she has a really good one about like just no to Rent. But yeah, so no hate on the people who love those songs, but yes, this is a great example of representation issue. And I mean, it's not to mention only what you said, but it's based on La Boheme, which is like a structure from like 150 years ago or something.
Gabriel Rossini, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, and just to support what Noah is saying, it's like this is like I feel like Rent and many of the like automatic characters and moments that we think of where HIV is portrayed in pop culture, it was most of the time there because it was not being put there by someone who was positive or someone who was even adjacent to HIV and AIDS in any form. And, I think that's where like it just understates the importance of why works about people need to be created and by and for those people, right?
Well, one of the out of what you're saying, Patrick, is that at the decision-making level of how people with HIV are treated or these things, is that the people living with that experience are at that level. So one thing we're not saying is actual people who will do a good job representing people living with HIV or any condition. It goes beyond HIV to other areas, but at the executive level, so to speak, or they are like the farce of like some sort of like creating a committee to manage that or something. But so you'd have to work really hard to get up there. You know what I'm saying? To get to the decision-making level, and even then, it's probably not going to be treated like a true equal collaborative or decision level. So one thing that is great in this case is that the art at hand has been allowed to develop in its way without saying, oh, hey, actually we're going to be with this community, so you have to change this and this and this. So that hasn't occurred. Is that it's going to be pretty directly expressive.
Yeah, and I guess that although we could have a whole other podcast about our issues with Jonathan Larson, I'm ready. I am ready to do that for 2 hours at least.
Let's do it.
But I would love to know both Noah from you and from Alex what a work. And again, this may be a duh question, but there are a lot of people who I think need to hear this. What a work gains from having folks with direct lived experience behind that work, and not just behind that work in a minimal capacity, like someone's adjusting a light over in the corner. No shade to lighting people; they do very important work. But that lived experience in the holistic piece.
Well, I think that that is not only true for art, but I think that I mentioned the fact that Connecticut has fallen behind a little bit is because precisely that people with lived experiences in Connecticut are not part of the people who make decisions or the leadership. Yeah. It's a big problem. So it's been that way for a long time. And there's something called meaningful consumer involvement, MIPA. And yeah, that's an issue that we need to work on and sort of like force the issue. What does that mean? You know, I mean, it's just not going to committee meetings. I know use the phrase our consumers, which they call people with HIV councils, have been curated. And I love that because it's like these consultants run these dog and pony shows and they're very confusing and people just sort of like have to sign off on them. So
we all that's been proposed before too, so it's just it feels like someone's being hired to do nothing except for make it seem like something's going to happen, or like that's just you know, like well yeah, even the term consumer, like maybe I don't want to be called consumer, you know.
Yeah, the term itself sort of connotates you sort of sapping the system or making a living off the system. I started a new group for New Haven called the HIV Constituent Caucus. We took the word consumer out.
Yeah.
The little things like that, yeah, reflect the bias.
So, oh, Noah, go ahead, please. You looked like you were about to speak.
No, what were you going to say?
Oh, I wanted to say, you know, on one hand, we have this piece of art, and then on the other hand, we have a relatively new mayor in New Haven, less new than at the beginning of this year, of course. And then we have the Connecticut State Legislature going back into session in January. And so what is it really important? And Patrick, I want you to pipe up here as well. What is it really, what are the discussions that need to be happening, I guess, in concert with this piece?
I guess in the silence, I'll break forward.
Please.
Really expanding access and eligibility to quality HIV care and healthcare with the unfettered access. That would mean so much and make such a big difference to people living with HIV as well as people who are uninfected. We need to expand access. And for 10 years, I've been trying to push this idea of, we have a program called Ryan White in New Haven. It's people who are in the program have a viral load suppression rate of over 90%. That's phenomenal, better than the national average. It's a great program that works, so why don't we just expand it? Right now it's cut off at 300% of the poverty level. So expanding it just makes sense, get more people to care. Vermont and Maine and Massachusetts are at 500% of the poverty level. And yet Connecticut's like so much more expensive to live in. Yeah, so that disparity just blows my mind, that I do not understand why there's the resistance to expand and raise that eligibility guideline for Connecticut.
Yeah.
So that'd be one thing, expanding access to care.
Absolutely.
I'd love to see, and I don't think this is necessarily true at the city level, because I think the mayor's task force is this in a lot of ways, but I'd love to see, for example, I'd love to see President Biden to reestablish the HIV and AIDS council that existed pre-President Trump. And I'd like to see it made up of all people who are HIV positive and not just a bunch of doctors and bureaucrats. Like, that's the kind of change I'd love to see. I'd love to see at the state level these, all of these various health department and otherwise created initiatives being solely designed and perpetuated by people who live with HIV. To me, I think that's the ultimate way that we stop talking at people and we start actually doing what folks need, right? And prioritize their voice in how we are doing this. I get calls constantly from people that are like, oh, we don't know how to reach blah, blah, blah community to talk about our latest study and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, like how many people living with HIV that are Black and brown and trans have you actually spoken to? And why are you calling me? Because that's not who I am, right? And like, and they don't even begin to know who to speak to, or they have no idea. They're like, I don't know where Black and brown people are. Well, walk out your door, right? Like, it's just, I feel like so many of the issues that Alex gets very frustrated about and then emails me, because Alex emails me like twice a week, and I appreciate them, and I say that with love, Alex, are because these systems are being perpetrated by bureaucrats and being perpetrated by what Noah's talking about, these companies that make more money off of people being sick. Listen, nobody cared about HIV and AIDS until straight white men started dying. Nobody cared. Like literally the president of the United States didn't even say HIV for like 8 years. Like, and it's like, it's ridiculous. And the fact that it's like, literally there's more people that will die of HIV this year than probably COVID. There's more people that will certainly have died of HIV over its lifetime than probably any disease in American history. Yet we still don't have a cure. We're still not prioritizing it any way that has meaningful change. And it just like, it frustrates me to no end, and I will stop talking.
Yeah.
Taking up too much space.
Noah, how about you?
Well, things have to change, but sometimes it doesn't feel like they're going to, you know? So that's problems. So, so we all have to work, gotta work, and gotta talk about it. And it's not going to feel good, especially for people who have trauma around it. It's like even at this moment, I feel tired, very tired. But the thing is, we're still fighting, and there's never been an end to the fighting. So to sort of round it back to what you said earlier, there is an idea that that living with HIV is no longer an issue. So to reflect what Patrick said, if that was established and the president were to fill the council with all people with lived HIV experience, especially not just white men, that would be probably a good starting place and a good message. But I mean, there has to be much more than that that's done. And it has to go down to each small interaction and each small joke about someone who lives with HIV, or, why don't you ask the person how they feel? And then why don't you try to do that respectfully if you're thinking about it, and educate yourself, be discerning. We're not being as discerning with information or the way we think anymore. Yes, it feels like nobody cared about death from HIV until some white straight person died, as Patrick said. But in reality, that care it ranges the emotion from grief to the unknown to fear to apathy on both sides. And so it's just out of control, control in the US and probably elsewhere as well. Not to say certain places are different for different reasons, which I think they are. And in New Haven here, you'd think it's good, but it doesn't. It doesn't feel that way. And the small interactions, the smaller things that happen, it's worrisome. Like you don't feel like you can control your health. You don't feel like you have any say over what's going to happen to your body. And then there's other issues that make you feel trapped into a box, whether it's with a cap, or if it's with some sort of, just the way you're treated in any interaction. Maybe you're signed up for a surgery and nobody told you about it properly. It's stuff like maybe somebody performed a surgery on you without telling you they were going to. Maybe now you have to pay like $1,000 and you weren't aware that was going to happen to you, and you actually shouldn't have to be paying for that. So, and then these are things that people have to deal with, like manage on their own. Basically, it feels like you're alone.
Yeah. Sorry.
I said things have to change.
Yeah. So as our time winds down, I want to say that Night Sweats will not be a singular performance. There's an exhibition and 5 days of discussions that will accompany the multimedia performance and the Elsie Coalfield Awards. If you don't know the name Elsie Coalfield, we could have a whole other podcast on that. What an amazing, amazing person in New Haven. Very quickly, Patrick, I just want to ask you, what can people expect from those 5 days?
Sure. So first of all, you can get more information about Night Sweats and all of the programs that are part of World AIDS Day observation by going to newhavenpridecenter.org/World AIDS Day. You can also visit our Wall of Remembrance and add a name or 2 or 10 to the Wall of Remembrance as well. There's a link right on that page as well. So you can expect some hard conversations, honestly. You know, we're kicking off with a conversation that is titled The Early Days, What Was It Like? With Alex as one of our panelists. And we will go all the way up to 2020 with our conversations. We have a conversation about health equity with some of the leading, I would argue, some of the most important doctors in HIV, in Connecticut for sure, but definitely more broadly, Dr. Gary Blick, Dr. AC Demidant, Dr. Chris Alonso. You know, we're going to be having conversations and with HIV positive artists with our exhibition, which is Artistic Perspectives on HIV with John Suro and Jonathan Joseph. And we're also going to be doing a world, I think it's a world premiere it's a premiere of some kind because the artist keeps calling it a premiere, of the film I Still Remember, which is based on a photography series. It's a documentary based on a photography series of photos that explore love and lost in HIV. And that will be also on World AIDS Day prior to the performance of Night Sweats. You know, obviously the centerpiece to the entire week is Night Sweats, and it is free to watch and stream. We will be streaming it on all of the center and the Mayor's Task Force platforms. So you have no excuse not to watch it. I'm just saying.
Oh, Noah, were you going to say something?
Yes, please, if you would like to submit the name of someone you know who had lost their battle with HIV or AIDS, you can find that resource on the Pride Center's website. I also, right now, I have it up on my Instagram, which is noah.michael.smith. So if you just go to my Instagram, you can click on the bio or New Haven Pride Center. Am I missing anything? Yeah, so there's, submit the name if you love and you would like them to be remembered.
Well, Patrick Dunn, Reverend Alex Garbera, and Noah Michael Smith, I want to thank you all so much for joining me. If you have not yet seen work that Arian Wilkerson has done, they are an incredible, incredible multimedia performer, and you are in for a huge treat with this performance, but also please look up their work. There's a wonderful article in the Hartford Courant, and we have also written on their work. They do some profound stuff, and I'm very excited for this performance. I think I speak for a lot of people. If you want to find out more about the programming around Night Sweats or Night Sweats itself, you can go to newhavenpridecenter.org. New Haven Pride Center is also on Facebook as the New Haven Pride Center, or on Instagram and Twitter at New Haven Pride. Oh, and Arian is here just as we're logging off.
What's up, everyone? Hello.
Hi, Arian.
Hi, Lucy. Long time no see. What's up?
I know.
I hope you're well. I miss you.
I miss you too. I miss you too. Unfortunately, we're winding down.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know it's like the last 3 minutes, but I figured I could say hi.
I just shouted you out. You're so amazing. I'm really happy to see your face.
Oh, cool. Oh, cool. Yeah. I'm really excited. I just wanted to say that I'm really excited. Sorry that I've been sort of like not present. It's been like a whirlwind of everything.
You're okay.
Like that. But yeah, we've been sort of like filming crazily for this Night Sweats, and we're kind of taking it, I mean, and it's very serious, but I am taking it super serious, which I guess I last minute didn't expect. That's why I'm saying it so freely. I apologize for the dance music in the background.
You're good.
But yeah, Noah is fucking incredible. Patrick is a fucking genius. I love him forever. Sorry for my swearing. Yeah, I'm super excited to like film it. The piece is super cool. It's sexy. It's fun. It's very experimental. I'm sort of doing some things that I've never done before. It's cinematic, but it's also very like digital and I tried to make sure that I did something that was extreme, but also like in the sort of like aesthetic of what we're kind of experiencing now. So I'm really excited, and yeah, that's sort of how I had to jump in.
Oh my gosh. Well, you are amazing. Thank you so much. Please, viewers, listeners, if you do not know about Arian Wilkerson's work, you should. So look up their name, find our articles and the Hartford Courant's articles on them. And I am so freaking excited for this performance. Find out more about Night Sweats at newhavenpridecenter.org. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lucy.
This is Harry Droz, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven.